Hey, welcome back to the Wake Up Live podcast. Glad you can make it with us, being part of these wake up conversations. And we've been bringing in some great friends for each of these, I don't know if we call them phases of conversation, starting with Zonti, Roy Tosh, and now here with me, good buddy, Peabod, man. Hey. Thanks for being here, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Excited to be here.
Yeah, it's so good to just get in a room with people like you who, you know, we look at you guys, you're living your life kind of in the public eye, but you're normal people. Mm-hmm. And that's what these conversations are. Now, when we started with Zonti, it was kind of like, we want to talk about living this life with God, but like for real, you know, with all the challenges and the struggles that most of us go through, not pie in the sky Christianity, but just like on the ground, like real stuff. And then when Roy Tosh came, a good buddy of yours, we talked about like identity and purpose and living with rest, you know, three amazing things that all of us want, right? But what was interesting is when I mentioned that to you when we were talking, you did admit that that's inspirational.
Of course.
It's great. Like, who doesn't want that? And let's all go get that, right? But that wasn't the only reaction you had. Tell me kind of how that set with you and how that hit you.
Right, yeah. I think that a big part of the Christian life and really moving forward in it is, of course, like we have the greatest hope ever in Jesus. Yeah. But that doesn't mean we don't, like we're promised hardship in this life. And so I think it's obviously so important to talk about who you are, your identity, why we're on this earth, and like how to, you know, rest and take care of ourselves. But sometimes things get in the way of those. And so for me, like part of my story is dealing with some pretty heavy anxiety and mental health issues. And that's mental health as a huge topic affects a lot of people. Yeah. And so we just got to talking and we're thinking about like, maybe we should chat about like, what are the things that can get in the way of remembering where our identity is found, remembering what our purpose is, and learning to rest in the Lord. Like, what are the obstacles? And a lot of times those obstacles are in our heads.
Oh man, so it's so true. Like there are lots of problems externally, obviously, right? Yes. Like that's, we look at the world around us and we just see like, man, can this thing get any worse? But we realize if we take a deep dive into our souls, right, into our hearts, we realize that so much of the problem is right inside of us.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah. So these episodes that we're gonna be, these conversations we're gonna have, these wake up conversations that we call them here, is gonna be related to mental health and kind of navigating that space that we all have to live in. So your journey, as we were talking, starts kind of around the pandemic, kind of where you started realizing that something wasn't feeling right.
Right. Yeah. So I'm excited to jump into this topic because it, like you said, this is something that is real for me. So I think anyone who has any sort of mental health issue or anxiety would tell you that once they've realized it, they can look back over their life and be like, oh, I've actually been dealing with this since I was, in fifth grade or whatever. Like, I have some really specific memories from fifth grade that are like, that are like the feelings that I associate with anxiety now. I can trace that back, but I didn't know that in 2020 when all of a sudden I started having anxiety attacks. And so I think probably a lot of people, actually, I know for a fact a lot of people became aware of mental health things they were dealing with during the pandemic because, nothing like months and months in your home and, everything in the world getting thrown off to make you stop and examine your own mind a little bit.
So what were some, like you talk about things getting thrown off. I know for me, I had just come to my new church and my new responsibilities here at Project and I felt like things were moving in a really good direction. Yes. And there was like momentum happening in all that I was doing. And then all of a sudden, bam, like everything stops. Yes. Everything gets shut down. And it was just so demoralizing at that time.
Jarring.
Even to the point where I was talking to God and I was saying, God, like we were doing stuff. Like, why does this have to happen now?
Yes.
You had something similar, I would assume, in your experience.
Yeah. So I was on a tour actually that was supposed to kind of be like a next step tour.
Okay.
And you know, when you're an artist, you're always kind of looking for those stepping stones that can kind of help you go from one place to the next. And this was supposed to be that. And we got 4 shows in, and they were like, hey, there's this virus going around. On Tuesday, we'll let you know like what the update is. On Tuesday, they were like, okay, we're just canceling 1 show, but the rest of the tour is on. By Wednesday, the whole thing was canceled. And so I went from feeling pretty hopeful about like this next step in my future to going like, all of this that I've worked for, that me and my team have worked for is now gone, that we thought was gonna be a really cool, good thing. So that was definitely a contributing factor. But honestly, I feel like maybe even more than being let down in those ways for me was all of a sudden we were all inside at home, and I had a lot more time with my own brain. And it's really easy, more so than ever, I think, to distract ourselves from what's going on in our minds and in our bodies, because you can always listen to music. We've got AirPods. I can walk around with my AirPods for like 8 hours before they die. We've got TikTok and Instagram. We've got every streaming platform in the world. There's so much noise we can allow in. I'm not saying all of that is bad. There's lots of cool stuff out there. But if you want to never examine what's going on in your head, you can feasibly do that. From the time you wake up to the time you go to bed, you can have something keeping you away from what's actually going on inside of me. And so all of a sudden there was more quiet in my life than I was used to. And I just started having these moments where like I could not, I just couldn't function really. Like I would feel this really just overwhelming sense of anxiety, and it was sometimes attached to specific things, sometimes not. Like at one point, for example, during the pandemic, my wife and I moved, and we moved from like an apartment to a house, and I had this like weird like paranoia thing going on where like every noise I heard outside, because it was just our unit and there were no neighbors to like have eyes out for whatever, every noise was like someone's like in our backyard, someone's like jiggling the handle of the door. None of that was actually true, but my brain would convince me that there was something unsafe about where I was at. And it got to the point finally where my sweet wife, who's much wiser than I am, was like, maybe you should explore going to therapy. And so I'll kind of fast forward a bit. I did 2 years of therapy, and I'm not going to say I'd never get anxious anymore, because I definitely do. I've had moments even this week, but I've got some tools now, and I know some things about myself now that I didn't, some things about God that I believe differently now than I did before. And so I'm really excited for these conversations, just to kind of share about like what's been helpful for me in my journey. If people are kind of taking those first few steps, I'm not claiming to be an expert or anything, but I can share some things that have been some good truth I've found, some things that have been practically helpful, and we can explore it from there.
It's interesting. You bring up this moment where like the shutting of everything down brought this reality to you, this quietness that I think this is the way you put it, where now you couldn't ignore what was going on in your brain anymore. And you learned some things about yourself. So I guess what I'm wrestling with is like so much, those of us who are involved in spiritual growth and religiosity and church life and those kinds of things, we do talk about the value that quiet has, that introspection has, and yet it seems in your story that it was almost a negative thing, Or was the negative thing that you were distracting yourself from that, or maybe, I don't know. I guess I'm kind of like wondering like how all of that kind of balances out in your journey.
Absolutely. Well, because I will say now, one of the things that has been most redeemed for me is quiet.
Okay.
Like now I'm in a place where 9 times out of 10 I can be quiet by myself with my own thoughts, and I'm not freaking out.
Okay.
And so I think because obviously you look through the Psalms and through scriptures, you look at Jesus' life on earth, and solitude is something that is of high value.
Very
and
much
so
so.
I think as Christians we learn that, but I do think that like I was saying earlier, we have every opportunity to distract ourselves today, and it's in those moments of quiet that I think we get to do things like confess to the Lord, or we get to present our fears to Him, or we get to offer up our hopes to Him. It's where we get to be vulnerable with God.
Yeah.
And being vulnerable is scary, even if it's with yourself, even if it's with the Lord. And so I think for me, I felt like I had rhythms. Like I think I would have believed that I had these rhythms of being quiet and, doing my devotions or whatever. But it became very apparent when there was forced quiet or forced moments of like, now it's time to like, there's not enough going on. So what else are you going to do but like think? My thoughts could just get crazy and paranoid and like at the drop of a hat. And so that was the real indicator to me that like, okay, something's off. And this is not the Lord's design for my brain. There's something that I need some help with here.
I learned in that same time that you were going through your thing, here's what I learned about myself, because you talked about you learned a lot about yourself. I was so upset even with God.
Yeah.
And God taught me that, Milton, the first thing you need to learn is that you've got to allow my timeline to be above your timeline.
Yeah.
I had a plan. I had a vision. I had it mapped out. This is where I want my church and my ministry at Project to go. These are the steps I want to take. And it's all moving in that direction. And it seemed like the evidence was that it was happening, and then it got shut down. And in the midst of that getting shut down, and God saying, you have to have my timeline over yours, and also you need to learn to trust me. And that's the one that was the scariest. I truly didn't trust God. I acted like I trusted God. I even thought I trusted Him, but I trusted Him inside of my own strength and my own power and my own imagination and planning.
Sure, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that was a hard lesson to learn. It's still one I wrestle with, right? Because I'm still learning to trust. Now I'm learning to trust in other areas, and I have to learn to release. And I can understand that part that you're talking about of like, I didn't know this about myself.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. I think that's really good. And I think what's interesting about that too is like God isn't a God who is sending bad things at us. Like that's not in His character. But I think that part of that trust is going, I trust, and we'll talk about this more later when we dive into the character of God.
Yeah.
But learning to go, I trust that my God is infinitely redemptive beyond anything I could imagine. He can take any situation and use it for good. And so I think like kind of what you're saying is like stuff went off the rails, and you had to learn that like, the Lord can use this still. It's not broken. He can do more than salvage it. He can turn it into something better than I could have ever imagined for His own purposes. And I think it's so easy to get caught up in our own imagination about like what the future could be like or what life could be like. And He will always, open us up to the possibilities of what else He could do. Yeah. So in talking about trust, I do just want to add in that anyone who has dealt with mental health sometimes you'll come across people who say, well, the only reason you're dealing with this is because you don't trust God enough.
Oh, yeah.
And so this is why I'm excited for some of the conversations we'll have later on, because what you're saying of learning, like being called out on the spots where we don't trust God, is really important. And that is a part of our walk in our faith. And also knowing when to toe the line and knowing when we can go, this might just be happening to me. I might have other stuff that is going on here that trusting God definitely could help me with this. And maybe there are some barriers that I need to present to him and walk through that are keeping me from doing that fully. And so I'm really excited. I know in the next couple episodes, we're kind of going to dig into like this weird, I guess the semantics of trust, or maybe like what do we mean when we're talking about that practically? Because it's not enough if someone's having an anxiety episode to be like, trust God more, bro. You know what I mean? But which I know that's not what you're saying. Because then on the other side, there are moments where it's like, well, yeah, we do need to trust God more, and we have to trust in his character more. So it'll be cool to, as we go forward, kind of explore the nuance of what does that mean for mental health to trust in the Lord practically? Yeah.
Well, these are the conversations we're going to be getting into, and we want to invite everybody to join us because we got several episodes. We're going to hit different parts of this topic on mental health and as Christians and God. So want to invite you to join us on each of these episodes as they come out. Make sure to like and subscribe to these episodes so that you can stay abreast about everything that's coming up. But man, we got a lot of great conversations coming, and so stick with us, and we'll see you in the next one.